Flying 30,000 feet above the Earth in a metal tube, traveling 500 miles per hour, is a miracle of modern engineering. But somehow, that's not what some passengers choose to focus on. We've dug through complaint files, customer service records, and online reviews to find 50 airline complaints so spectacularly absurd, they'll make you question everything you thought you knew about human logic. From passengers demanding refunds for the color of the sky to rage over seatbelts that actually work. This is your boarding pass to a journey through the twilight zone of air travel. Buckle up. These are the 50 dumbest airline complaints ever. Filed. 1. A woman on a morning flight from Boston to Chicago filed a formal complaint because the sunrise she witnessed from her window seat was disappointingly orange. She had apparently expected a pink and purple sunrise like the ones she'd seen in motivational Instagram posts. She accused the airline of choosing a flight path that resulted in inferior sunrise colors and demanded a partial refund for the subpar aerial photography experience. Her suggested solution: the airline should consult with meteorologists to schedule flights only when Instagram-worthy sunrises are guaranteed. 2. This passenger bought a ticket on Spirit Airlines, AEA, budget carrier famous for charging extra for everything, and was outraged to discover that, yes, they do charge extra for everything. His complaint letter was 8 pages long, expressing shock and betrayal that his $47 ticket didn't include free checked bags, seat selection, beverages, or snacks. He felt personally victimized by the budget airline business model he had deliberately chosen and demanded they rename themselves Dishonest Airlines for transparency. 3. During boarding, a man watched the baggage handlers loading suitcases into the cargo hold below. He became increasingly distressed and eventually filed a complaint because the workers were, in his words, throwing the luggage without any regard for the aerodynamic consequences. He was genuinely concerned that improperly stacked luggage would make the plane lopsided and cause it to fly in circles. His recommendation was that all baggage should be loaded according to weight, distribution diagrams that passengers could review and approve before. Takeoff. 4. A passenger was furious that the in-flight meal service offered chicken or pasta, not because he had dietary restrictions, but because he's a Scorpio, and neither option aligned with his astrological nutritional needs. He filed a complaint demanding that airlines begin including zodiac signs in their customer profiles and offering astrologically appropriate meal options. He wrote a detailed explanation of how serving a Scorpio pasta during Mercury retrograde was basically a hostile act that disrupted his spiritual alignment. 5. After landing, a woman complained that the flight attendant's cheerful goodbye at the exit was sarcastic and insincere. She claimed she could detect micro-expressions of contempt in the attendant's smile. The crew member's crime, saying, "Goodbye, have a great day," in the exact same pleasant tone she'd used for the previous 200 passengers. The complaint letter included a request for the airline to hire a body language expert to coach staff on more authentic facial expressions, or alternatively, to stop forcing them to smile altogether. 6. A business traveler on a red-eye flight was offered complimentary noise-canceling headphones. He declined. Then he complained about the noise. His grievance letter specifically stated that he shouldn't have to wear headphones to experience silence, and that the airline should engineer a completely soundproof cabin. When the customer service rep pointed out that he'd been offered a solution, he argued that needing to wear something was itself an inconvenience worthy of compensation. 7. This complaint defies basic physics. A passenger on a flight from Los Angeles to Tokyo was enraged that despite flying for 11 hours, she could still see the sun when she landed. She was convinced the plane had been flying in circles and not actually going anywhere. She had expected to land in complete darkness and felt the persistent daylight was proof of airline fraud. She demanded a refund and threatened to report the airline for pretending to travel across the Pacific. 8. A man filed a complaint because the pilot announced they'd reached cruising altitude, but the ship didn't have a pool, a buffet, or a casino. He had apparently confused an airplane with a cruise ship and felt the term cruising was false advertising. His complaint letter included suggestions for installing at minimum a hot tub in first class and a small blackjack table near the emergency exit. The fact that he'd been on airplanes before made this complaint even more baffling. 9. A passenger complained that the window shade in her row was stuck halfway, not on her window, window, mind you, but on the window 2 seats over. She didn't ask the person to adjust it. She didn't inform the flight attendant. She simply sat there, stewing in silent rage for 4 hours, then wrote a scathing review upon landing. She argued that all window shades should be controlled by a central system so that passengers wouldn't have to rely on the inconsiderate whims of strangers to achieve uniform cabin lighting. 10. Here's one for the books. A passenger watched a child sitting 3 rows ahead drop a small toy in the aisle. A flight attendant picked it up and returned it to the child with a smile. This somehow enraged the complaining passenger, who wrote that the flight attendant's helpfulness to the child, but not to him, a man who had asked for nothing and needed nothing, was blatant discrimination against child-free adults. He demanded an apology and suggested the airline implement a strict toy retrieval equality policy. 11. A woman purchased a ticket in economy class, checked in online, walked past business class during boarding, and sat in her assigned economy seat without incident. Then she filed a complaint. Her grievance? That the airline had allowed her to book an economy ticket when she clearly deserved better. She argued that the airline should have screening software that detects important passengers and automatically upgrades them, regardless of what they paid. She described having to sit in economy as a character assassination. 12. A passenger complained that the flight attendant's name tag said Destiny, not because of any service issue, but because he felt the name was too fatalistic for someone working in aviation. He claimed that hearing a crew member named Destiny made him think too much about fate and mortality at 30,000 feet. He suggested the airline should require all crew members to use neutral pseudonyms like Crew Member A to avoid triggering existential dread in anxious passengers. 13. During meal service, a passenger was offered a cookie. He examined it closely and refused it, then filed a complaint. The cookie's crime? It had chocolate chips arranged in a pattern that vaguely resembled a frowning face. He felt this sad cookie was a passive-aggressive commentary on his economy ticket and the airline's opinion of budget travelers. His complaint included a grainy photo of the alleged judgmental baked good and a demand that all cookies be screened for emotional content before being served. 14. A man was watching the in-flight tracker on his screen when he noticed the little airplane icon occasionally wobbling slightly as it moved across the map. He immediately pressed the call button and informed the flight attendant that there was clearly something wrong with the plane's stability. Despite her explanation that it was just a graphic animation, he insisted on filing a formal incident report about the erratic flight pattern he'd witnessed on his screen. He later wrote that the airline was covering up a near disaster. 15. This complaint wins points for sheer entitlement. A passenger seated in 12B was upset that the passenger in 12A got served their drink approximately 4.3 seconds before he did. He timed it. He complained that this beverage inequality made him feel like a second-class citizen and created a humiliating power dynamic within the row. He proposed that the airline develop a synchronized pouring system where all drinks in a row are served simultaneously to preserve passenger dignity and prevent psychological trauma. 16. A woman filed a complaint because she could see her own reflection in the turned-off entertainment screen. She wasn't concerned about the screen not working. It worked fine. She was upset that during a moment of daytime reflection, she didn't like how she looked. She argued that the airline screen technology was unflattering and made her face appear 5 pounds heavier. She demanded the airline install screens with built-in beauty filters so passengers could maintain their self-esteem during periods of screen inactivity. 17. A passenger was offered a choice between Coke and Pepsi. He asked for Sprite. When informed they didn't have Sprite, he filed a complaint accusing the airline of engaging in a cola duopoly conspiracy. His letter detailed his belief that Coca-Cola and Pepsi had formed an illegal alliance to suppress lemon-lime sodas at 35,000 feet. He demanded the airline break free from Big Cola and offer an independent selection of citrus-based beverages or face his continued during turbulence. The seatbelt sign illuminated and the pilot asked everyone to return to their seats. One passenger who was in the lavatory at the time complied. After landing, he filed a complaint for emotional distress. His issue? He felt rushed in the bathroom and claimed the pilot's timing was inconsiderate. He argued that pilots should be trained to predict turbulence and avoid it during high-traffic bathroom times. He seriously suggested the airline install forestall turbulence, forecasting displays outside, lavatories so passengers could plan accordingly. 19. A man on an overnight flight pulled his complimentary blanket from the wrapper and was immediately disappointed. He filed a complaint, stating that the blanket's thread count was insultingly low, and the fabric felt like a betrayal of the social contract between airline and passenger. He had apparently expected Egyptian cotton bedding on his discount red-eye flight. His complaint included a detailed comparison with luxury hotel bedding and a suggestion that airlines partner with five-star hotels to provide appropriate sleeping textiles. 20. This passenger's complaint was about grammar. During the safety demonstration, the flight attendant said, "In the unlikely event of a water landing," the passenger took issue with unlikely. He argued that using this word was the airline admitting there was still a chance of water landing, and that acknowledging this possibility was poor marketing. He suggested they change the phrasing to "in the impossible event," or better yet, just not mention water landings at all to avoid manifesting negative outcomes. 21. A woman was seated next to an empty seat and complained about it. Not because someone smelly sat there, but because no one did. She felt the empty seat was mocking her loneliness and making her feel undesirable. She argued that the airline should have a policy of filling all seats to prevent the psychological damage of sitting next to a vacancy. When customer service explained that an empty seat next to you is usually considered lucky, she doubled down, insisting the emptiness was a void of judgment. 22. A passenger asked for tomato juice, a popular in-flight beverage choice. The flight attendant smiled and said, "Good choice. Everyone loves tomato juice on planes." The passenger filed a complaint about this comment, arguing that the flight attendant's assumption was statistically impossible and represented a troubling lack of critical thinking skills. He felt that flying with crew members who make sweeping generalizations was unsafe. He included a bibliography of sources proving that not everyone, in fact, loves tomato juice. 23. Here's a complaint about the pilot being too good at his job. After an exceptionally smooth landing, the kind where you barely feel the wheels touch down, a passenger complained that the gentle landing made him feel like the pilot was showing off. He argued that such an unnecessarily perfect landing was showboating and made the other passengers' previous flight experiences seem inferior in comparison. He felt humbled by the pilot's skill, and that feeling of inadequacy ruined his arrival. 24. A man traveling with his emotional support peacock, yes, this was briefly a real thing, was denied boarding. Surprisingly, that's not what he complained about. He complained that the gate agent who denied him didn't even compliment the peacock. He felt that if the airline was going to reject his feathered companion, the least they could do was acknowledge its magnificent plumage. His complaint letter demanded mandatory training for all staff on how to politely deliver rejections with appropriate compliments. 25. During beverage service, a passenger requested water. The flight attendant brought him water. He then complained that she hadn't asked if he wanted ice. He didn't want ice. He specifically preferred room temperature water, but he felt the lack of the question itself was disrespectful. He argued that being asked about ice preferences is a fundamental human right, and that the airline's failure to ask represented a disturbing erosion of customer service standards and Western civilization as a whole. 26. A woman glanced at the emergency instruction card in her seatback pocket and immediately filed a complaint. Her issue: the illustrated passengers and the emergency diagrams were all unrealistically calm. She argued that depicting people peacefully sliding down evacuation slides was false, advertising and set unrealistic expectations for emergency behavior. She wanted the airline to illustrate passengers with more authentic expressions of panic and chaos, so travelers could mentally prepare for realistic emergency scenarios. 27. This complaint is about air, specifically that there was air. A passenger on a particularly dry flight complained that the cabin air was too invisible. He could feel it drying his skin but couldn't see it, which he found unsettling. He suggested the airline add a light mist or fog to the cabin air to make it more visible and trustworthy. When the airline tried tried to explain that invisible air is normal air. He insisted that anything he couldn't see was suspicious. 28. A passenger watched the pre-flight safety video and took issue with the production quality. Not because it was poorly made, but because it was too entertaining. The video featured animation and mild humor, which he felt trivialized the serious nature of safety. He filed a complaint demanding a return to boring, text-only safety briefings delivered in monotone voices to properly communicate the grave weight of potential disaster. He felt anything less than absolute dreariness was irresponsible. 29. A man requested a ginger ale. The flight attendant brought him a can of ginger ale and a cup of ice, then poured it for him. He complained. His issue? He wanted to pour it himself. He felt that the flight attendant pouring it for him was infantilizing and stripped him of his autonomy. He wrote a passionate letter about the importance of self-determination in beverage preparation and suggested the airline implement a policy where passengers verbally consent to staff-poured drinks before any pouring commences. 30. A passenger filed a complaint. Because the airplane had a tail, she felt that the tapered rear section of the aircraft created an unfair hierarchy where passengers seated in the front were in the better part of the plane. She argued that all passengers paid for airfare, and therefore the plane should be cylindrical with no distinguishable front or back to ensure complete equality. Her complaint included a hand-drawn sketch of a tube-shaped aircraft with seats facing all directions. 31. This traveler complained that the flight attendant said, "You're welcome." After he said thank you, he felt this response was presumptuous and implied that he should be grateful. He argued that a simple nod would be more appropriate, as verbal acknowledgement of his gratitude created an uncomfortable power dynamic. He wrote 3 pages on the microaggressions embedded in common courtesy phrases and suggested airlines adopt a silent gratitude acceptance policy. 32. During boarding, a passenger noticed the pilots doing their pre-flight checklist in the cockpit. He could see them through the open door, referencing papers and checking instruments. He filed a complaint, arguing that if the pilots needed a checklist, they clearly didn't know what they were doing. He felt that truly competent pilots should have every switch and procedure memorized, and that watching them study before takeoff destroyed his confidence. He demanded all pre-flight checks be done where passengers can't witness them. 33. A woman was offered peanuts as a snack. She declined as she's allergic to peanuts. So far, so reasonable. But then she filed a complaint that the flight attendant had offered her peanuts without first inquiring about her allergy status. She felt that offering peanuts without a pre-offer allergen screening was reckless endangerment. She wanted the airline to implement a system where passengers complete a full allergy questionnaire before any snack is offered, even if they plan to decline it anyway. 34. Passenger complained that his seat was too comfortable. He had deliberately booked a red-eye flight hoping to be so uncomfortable that he'd arrive exhausted and immediately adjust to the new time zone. Instead, the seat was ergonomically designed, and he slept peacefully for 7 hours. He landed well-rested, and his jet lag plan was ruined. He demanded compensation for the airline's failure to provide the expected level of discomfort. 35. Here's one that questions basic reality. A man flying from Miami to Seattle was confused why, if the flight was going north, the plane wasn't angled upward the entire time. He filed a complaint stating that the horizontal flight felt wrong, and that gravity should require the plane to tilt upward when traveling toward the North Pole. His understanding of both geography and physics was so fundamentally flawed that the customer service team didn't even know where to begin their response. 36. A passenger used the in-flight Wi-Fi to video call his friend. His friend asked, "Where are you?" The passenger pointed his camera at the window, showing only clouds. His friend said, "Cool." The passenger then complained to the airline that the view from the window wasn't interesting enough to adequately answer the question, "Where are you?" He suggested the airline install digital screens on the windows that display landmarks, city names, and points of interest so passengers have more engaging video call. A woman requested a special meal, gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan, low sodium, and organic. The airline accommodated her request perfectly. She then complained that her meal looked different from what other passengers were eating, which made her feel othered and ostracized. She argued that while she wanted a special meal, she didn't want it to look special. She suggested the airline disguise specialized meals to look identical to regular meals to protect the feelings of passengers with dietary restrictions. 38. During descent, a passenger felt his ears pop from the pressure change. This is normal. He did not think it was normal. He filed a complaint claiming the pressure change was physically invasive and that his ears were private property that the airline had no right to affect. He demanded the airline develop pressure-neutral cabins or provide advance warning and written consent forms before intentionally manipulating passenger ear pressure. 39. A man watched the flight attendants chatting and laughing with each other during a quiet moment in the galley. He filed a complaint accusing them of having too much fun at work. He felt their enjoyment of each other's company was unprofessional and made it seem like they weren't taking their job seriously. He argued that crew members should maintain solemn, serious expressions at all times to demonstrate proper respect for the grave responsibility of serving beverages at altitude. 40. This passenger's complaint was about the color blue. The airline's branding, seats, crew uniforms, and logo were all variations of blue. He argued that blue is a cold color that made him feel emotionally distant and unwelcome. He demanded the airline rebrand entirely to warm colors like orange and red. When the airline politely declined, he started a one-person campaign, reviewing them negatively for their hostile color psychology warfare against passengers. 41. A woman was seated in an exit row and asked by the flight attendant if she was willing and able to assist in an emergency. She said yes. After landing, she filed a complaint that being asked this question gave her anxiety about potential emergencies and ruined her flight. She felt that asking her to contemplate disaster scenarios was cruel and unusual. She wanted exit row passengers to be selected randomly without their knowledge, so they wouldn't have the psychological burden of preparation. 42. A passenger complained about the wing. Not that it was malfunctioning, but that it was visible from his window seat. He argued that seeing the wing was a constant reminder that he was in an airplane, which triggered his fear of flying. He felt the airline should configure window seats to only show sky and clouds, with the wings positioned out of view. His proposed solution involved completely redesigning aircraft architecture around passenger anxiety management. 43. During boarding, a flight attendant greeted passengers with, "Welcome aboard." One passenger took offense to the word aboard because it reminded him of pirates and made him think of hijacking and danger. He filed a complaint requesting that flight attendants use the greeting, "Welcome inside," instead. He included a linguistic analysis of nautical terminology and its inappropriate application to aviation, complete with citations. 44. A man was watching a movie on his personal device when the passenger in front of him reclined their seat. This didn't actually block his screen or cause any real problem, but he filed a complaint anyway. His issue, the psychological knowledge that someone was now slightly closer to him, made him uncomfortable. He could still watch his movie fine, but knowing the person had moved backward created what he called spatial anxiety. He wanted reclining, seats banned to protect passengers from proximity. Awareness. 45. A passenger noticed that the flight attendants used a curtain to separate business class from economy. He didn't complain about not being in business class. He complained about the curtain itself. He argued that curtains are passive-aggressive barriers that are more insulting than solid walls. He felt that if the airline was going to create class divisions, they should at least do it with architectural integrity. He suggested floor-to-ceiling walls with soundproofing to make the separation honest. 46. A woman filed a complaint about clouds, specifically that they were blocking her view of the ground. She had chosen a window seat specifically to watch the landscape below, but clouds kept getting in the way. She argued that the airline should check weather patterns and only fly on completely cloudless days, or at minimum, offer a discount if clouds obstruct more than 40% of the ground view during the flight. Meteorology was apparently not her strong suit. 47. This passenger's complaint was about the lack of complaints. He had mentally prepared himself for a terrible flight based on negative reviews he'd read online. Instead, everything went smoothly. On-time departure, friendly crew, good service. He filed a complaint that the positive experience made him feel foolish for his pre-flight anxiety, and that the airline should have warned him that not all flights match the horror stories online. He wanted an apology for the emotional whiplash of expecting disaster and receiving competence. 48. A man requested coffee. Black coffee. No sugar, no cream. The flight attendant brought him exactly what he asked for. He then complained that she hadn't offered him sugar or cream. Again, he didn't want them, but he wanted to be offered them. He felt that bringing coffee without offering condiments, even to someone who ordered black coffee, was assuming his preferences and robbing him of the agency to decline them himself. His complaint included a philosophical essay on the importance of choice. 49. During landing, the flight attendant announced, "Please remain seated until the captain has turned off the seatbelt sign and the aircraft has come to a complete stop at the gate." A passenger filed a complaint that this instruction was too controlling and didn't respect passengers as autonomous adults capable of making their own safety decisions. He felt that instructions should be reframed as suggestions to honor passenger independence. The irony that regulations exist because passengers consistently demonstrate poor judgment was lost on him. 50. And finally, the complaint that truly defies all logic. A passenger filed a formal complaint that his flight didn't crash. He had purchased flight insurance that would pay out in case of a crash, and he was apparently disappointed that he didn't get to collect. He argued that statistically, with millions of flights annually, at least a few should crash, and he felt personally unlucky that his flight wasn't one of them. He demanded the airline compensate him for the wasted insurance premium. The customer service team forwarded his complaint directly to their legal department, just in case. And there you have it. 50 complaints that prove the real turbulence in air travel isn't atmospheric, it's human. From passengers angry about smooth landings to travelers demanding clouds be removed from the sky, these stories remind us that sometimes the most absurd part of flying is the people sitting in the seats. So here's the question. Which of these 50 complaints wins the award for the most spectacularly, mind-bendingly absurd? Number 7, the woman who thought the plane was flying in circles because the sun was still visible. Number 50, the man disappointed his flight didn't crash? Or something in between? Drop your vote in the comments and defend your choice. If these stories made you laugh, cringe, or feel grateful you're not in customer service, smash that like button and subscribe for more journeys into human absurdity. Safe travels, everyone, and please be kind to your flight attendants. They've seen enough.